everyone. Long time no see. I haven't recorded a video in here like this for a few months now. It's been, I feel like, 25 years. But it happened again. It only went and happened again. I watched a show, I really loved it, and now I need to talk about it on this channel. So, hi. Hope you're all well. And I'm here today to talk about The Last of Us. Season 1, it finished for us in the UK, it finished today. I watched the finale a few hours ago, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind that I did want to do a video talking about the show as a whole because it's my favourite thing. I've been obsessed with it for the past 9 weeks. It's been airing, and I loved the games beforehand as well. So, as soon as they announced an adaptation was coming, I was extremely excited. And here we are. It was years ago that they announced this was going to be a thing, and now here we are. Season 1 has aired. We anticipate with bated breath, I guess. Wait with bated breath even for season 2, whenever that is going to happen, when it's going to come out. Next year at the absolute earliest, probably a couple of years, I would imagine. HBO shows and stuff, they take time. And I think Pedro Pascal said it's probably going to film this year, but who knows when we're going to get it. Either way, I think it's more than earned my my attention and my patience, because we've needed the patience to kind of wait for the show to come out. And if you ask me, it more than delivered. I bloody loved it from start to finish. A really sublime, I think, adaptation of the game. So a bit of history, I guess, to start with me. Also, I guess, spoilers for The Last of Us Season 1. Obviously, if you don't want to get spoiled, don't watch this, because I'm going to be talking about every single episode in, I say, a bit of detail. We'll see how long I ramble for. And, yeah, spoilers for The Last of Us game, which came out in 2013. God, that game's 10 years old this year. What the hell? So, yeah, spoilers for that as well, because, I might be discussing a few things that they changed from the game into the show, etc, etc. I won't be talking about the events of The Last of Us Part 2, which is obviously going to be, adapted for Season 2 and beyond, will be the second game, because this first season completely covered the first game. And yeah, I'm not going to spoil the events of that game for people who may not have played it, don't want to know what happens, don't want to look it up and stuff. They want to be surprised when Season 2 airs. And I'm sure they'll still do their twists, kind of like how they did with this one in terms of adapting it. But, some things they can't really change, I would say, from The Last of Us Part 2. So, yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how they're going to handle the events of that game in the show whenever we get it. But that is a video for another time, for sure. So don't worry about spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2. If you want to know anything about where the story's going next, you won't be getting any spoilers from me in this video. So be rest assured. So my history with The Last of Us, the games, when it first came out, obviously it took the world by storm, that first game in 2013. At that point, I was like, that game's going to be too scary for me, I'm not going to play it, but I will watch a playthrough on YouTube, which I did. I watched the Media Cows play it. A fantastic channel. Sadly, they're no longer active, which is, very sad. But they had a fantastic walkthrough of that game, so I did watch, the entire game played through. I think the only things of it I didn't watch were the Left Behind DLC. So when I did end up playing it myself, I played The Last of Us Remastered. So they remastered the game with the Left Behind DLC included. When it came to me playing that, I hadn't seen the Left Behind DLC, so that was the only bit I played completely blind and not knowing what to expect from it. Everything else, when I played through the main game, I'd already seen, so I knew what to expect and what was coming. Still scared me, still absolutely terrified me, but I got through it. And I actually binged it in a couple of days, and the day I finished it, The Last of Us Part 2 came out, which I had pre-ordered. So I finished the first game, I put the disc in for the second, waited for it to download, and then got on with it. And I played that for about a week then, and I'm still getting over it, the mental scars. But yeah, so I don't envy the people who played the first game when it came out and then had to wait 7 years to find out what was going to happen next. Thankfully, I didn't have to kind of go through that pain. I mean, I technically did, because I knew what happened, but, actually playing the game, I don't have to wait that long. Either way, that's kind of my brief history, and I absolutely adored both those games. It's a really bold, I think, take on the apocalypse and zombies and all of that, and the kind of found family that I think appeals to a lot of people in regards to like zombie shows, how the characters kind of bond in this impossible situation. Same reason I love the Walking Dead universe so much. The characters in that and how they kind of became a family. Oh, hello. My lights disagreed with me, but how they kind of come together as a family and stuff like that, which I think is very much the heart of the Last of Us games and the show, with Joel and Ellie's relationship, and him kind of finding a daughter all over again after Joel lost his daughter Sarah, when the end of the world first began. So I think they captured that journey beautifully in the games and in the show. And as soon as they announced that Pedro Pascal was going to be playing Joel, as soon as they announced Bella Ramsey was going to be Ellie, I was like, yep, it's in safe hands. I don't, no quarrels whatsoever with that. And then the more casting got announced, the more things kind of fell into place. Like, yeah, this is. I think this has all the potential to be something very, very special. And in HBO's hands, I think, I was really certain that this is going to be amazing, and it was. So, yeah, I'm just going to kind of talk through my general thoughts, I guess, episode by episode, and we'll go from there. I don't have any notes or anything. Normally with these kind of videos I make notes and stuff like that, but I didn't really have time. So yeah, it's fine. It is what it is. I do have a few tabs open so I can get like cast names right and episode titles right and stuff as I'm talking through it. But I just thought we could talk about the show. So do let me know, what were your favourite characters in the show? What was your favourite scenes? Your favourite performances? Your favourite characters? Favourite episodes? Things you really, really loved. Things maybe you wish they'd done differently. Was there anything that they didn't put in the games that you'd have loved to have seen in the show? Would you like to have seen more of certain things, less of certain things even? I'd be really interested in seeing how people responded to the way they chose to adapt to the show. For me, the fact that Neil Druckmann was so heavily involved and I think wrote and directed a whole bunch of this show, and obviously he, was one of the big creative visions behind the games, and I think he wrote both the games as well, and certainly directed them. His involvement, I was like, well, this is like his chance. Like, if I got to tell this story again, if I got to make these games again, this is how I would do it. So I was kind of really intrigued to see that vision. And if there's things that I'm sad that they didn't include, certainly they made huge changes with what happened with Bill in the show compared to the game. He didn't die, for starters. Spoilers. And there's a whole sequence where Ellie and Joel kind of find Bill. He's still alive. Frank is dead, but that's a whole different story. The romance between Bill and Frank is kind of implied but not shown at any point. And Frank seemed to have hated Bill by the end, whereas it was a real love story between Bill and Frank and what the show did with them. So they have this whole thing when they like sneak into a school, I think, to get a car battery, and that's when you first see a bloater, which we didn't actually see until I think episode 5 of the show. The absolute unit, mad lad, big lad. That's when you count one of them for the first time. They have the whole sequence in a school, like an abandoned school that's filled with the infected. And then off they go. They leave Bill and he's alive and well. Which is obviously, I think, probably the biggest departure of the show is how they handled Bill's character and bringing Frank into the mix in episode 3. So it would have been cool to see that sequence in live action, but also I can just play the game. I can play that bit of the game again. I can watch a playthrough of that bit of the game on YouTube. So it doesn't really bother me when things change that wildly. I'm a huge fan of the Shadowhunters show. They basically changed everything from the books. It's an adaptation. I don't mind that they change things very drastically, as long as they keep some core elements of the characters and stuff right. I don't really care, personally. I know some people don't feel that way, and I guess that's fair. But I just see it as like, well, it's multiple versions of the same story that I love. More for me. Thank you very much. Lots more to enjoy from this one story and world and characters that I really love. So I don't care that they maybe took huge deviations, but I think for the most part this was a really, really faithful adaptation of the events of the game. Particularly the finale, I felt was like basically unchanged, which was cool. But I also was very interested that they changed stuff up, and I think it keeps people watching the show who played the games and know what's going to happen. It keeps them on their toes. They're like, oh wow, if they changed that so drastically, maybe this is going to be a bit different. And they certainly added some new characters into the show that we didn't see, and changed a few little things up about the story that I personally really appreciated. And, you know, if I am, you know, a bit like, oh, I would have liked to have seen this, I can play the game and see it there. But yeah, regardless of all that, let's just kind of try and desperately get into this now, because I've already been rambling for like 10 minutes, so we need to stop, basically. But yes, so we kick off with episode 1, which was called When You're Lost in the Darkness. I really liked that, you know, the phrase of the Fireflies is like, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Episode 1 is called When You're Lost in the Darkness. Episode 9, the finale, is called Look for the Light. So I really like that they they literally bookended the first season of the show with that message. And, you know, tying into like Joel's light ended up being Ellie that he could look for to kind of save him from himself, really. In a way, you know, aside from, you know, murdering an entire hospital full of people. But that's fine. I'm sure that won't come back in any way, shape or form in regards to him lying to Ellie at the end there. But we'll see. So yeah, When You're Lost in the Darkness, this was obviously quite a long episode. It's like 80 minutes or so. The original intention, I think, was the show was 10 episodes and they merged episodes 1 and 2 together to get the premiere that we ultimately got. I think episode 1 otherwise would have just been the first day of the apocalypse and, you know, Sarah, getting to know her, she dies at the end. That's episode 1. Episode 2, present day, we meet Tess, we meet Ellie, stuff like that. But I think they wanted Ellie to be in the first episode. So I think it makes sense why they merged them together. And I don't think it felt as long as it actually was. And I loved the world building and everything they kind of did with it. You know, just knowing what was coming, and like the bit with the old woman in the background, she's going, Sarah's like inspecting something horrible. The bit with the dog when it's like it knows something's up with this old lady and it's just like staring at her. Oh god, it's so unnerving. As was the opening scene, the cold open of the show, featuring John Hannah, who is a fantastic actor. If you haven't seen him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he's brilliant in that. Touch of Cloth, he's so funny. He's just a brilliantly, you know, amazing actor. And him kind of as like this person on the talk show talking about, you know, if any kind of thing's going to kill us all one day, it's going to be, you know, fungus. It's going to be cordyceps. And, you know, if that starts to happen, we lose. Really kind of morbid way of setting the tone of the show, but I think it worked so effectively. I do kind of wish every episode had a cold open like that. I like that they brought it back for the finale, and we got a bit of, you know, a glimpse of Ellie's mother. But, you know, after the first 2 episodes had a really strong openings like that, I almost kind of missed them. Instead, we just got like previously ons. But, you know, if there's no place for them, then there's no place for them. Don't force them in the start of episodes just because you feel that you have to. But yeah, I love the kind of slow build up of, you know, things kicking off because you just know it's going to happen. And then, you know, in regards to what we learn later on about how the infection potentially started, you know, with like in like the yeast and bread factories, stuff like that. And you see like they were going to have pancakes for breakfast but didn't in the end, and they didn't eat the neighbour's cookies in the end, and Joel forgot to get a birthday cake in the end, so they didn't have like flour or something. Was it flour or yeast? Something like that. I think it was flour. Because they didn't have any of that, you know, they didn't get infected, and just things like that. I thought it was really clever how they kind of foreshadowed stuff like that they then pay off later on. And same for like episode 7, you know, Left Behind, which was the flashback with Ellie and Riley. You know, that portion of the game came out after the first game had come out. It was like downloadable content and they added in extra later, like a separate chapter to play. So the game couldn't really set that up really, because I guess they didn't know at the time that they were going to be making that DLC, or at least, you know, they weren't as like sure what it was going to be maybe yet to put it in the script for the game to set it up in any way, shape or form. But because the show knew we were going to have an episode based on the DLC, you know, Riley gets a mention in episode 1. Marlene mentions Riley to Ellie in episode 1. So I like that they kind of set the scene with that and set the stage, plant the seeds, and then that's paid off 6 episodes later when we actually meet Riley and see what she was all about and her relationship with Ellie. So I love that they kind of had stuff like that going on. And yeah, right from the off, I think Nico Parker is the actress who played Sarah, I believe. I do have a cast list up here. Let me just have a look. Yeah, Nico Parker, who is the daughter of Tandy Newton? I can't remember how to pronounce her name. And I know she has a thing where she's like, you've been saying my name wrong all this time, people. And I think I've probably butchered it twice there, so apologies. But the daughter of her, she was great. Really, really likeable as Sarah right from the off. I love that very much like the start of the first game. You play as Sarah for the first like 15-20 minutes of the game until what happens. So like you might think, oh, are we playing as Sarah for the game? And the way, like the first half an hour of this, it's very much kind of, it's like they're setting up Sarah to be the main character, and then if you know, as people who played the game, like, well, this isn't going to last, let's not get attached. But some people who don't know the game maybe don't know that she's going to die. So all of that with her, I think she was really likeable right from the off. So the actress was fantastic. And her relationship with Joel, I think they established that really well with the watch and her trying to get that fixed for him messing with her. Briefly seeing Tommy as well, setting up for him to come back in like the present day stuff later on, and played by Gabriel Luna, who is a fantastic actor. Again, another Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. actor from season 4 in episode 1 of The Last of Us. I was like, well, if I wasn't already sold, you've done it to me now. He's amazing in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's a great Ghost Rider. So watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So yeah, it was great to see that he got cast in this, and I thought he was great. His kind of rapport with Pedro and Nico in that scene, he really got sold very quickly that they were this nice family unit. And obviously Pedro Pascal, inspired choice to play Joel. He was brilliant throughout. And yeah, the kind of the vulnerability that he brought to Joel. I think Joel in the show, shows a lot more of his vulnerability than he did in the games, and I really like that side of him. And I think it makes a very interesting contrast for the moments when Joel just loses his shit. Like when he's torturing those guys in episode 8, like when he slaughters the whole hospital of people. And, in episode 6, him and Tommy are talking like, we murdered people. Maybe to survive, yes, but we murdered people. And, I think Joel almost gets a kick out of it. And I think in a way Ellie got a kick out of seeing Joel protect her to that extent, which I guess is a very morbid way of, why those two ended up getting along and being drawn to each other. And I guess you've got to do what you've got to do to survive in that world. But damn, Joel, it's, oh boy. So yeah, I thought that was right from the off. Just the casting's on point for the entire show. Everyone was phenomenal. And Pedro was no exception. Just the perfect Joel. He was amazing. And yeah, that whole sequence just absolutely broke my heart. Even when you know what's coming. That's the weird thing with this. I basically knew everything that was going to happen in this season. And yet I was still watching it getting really tense. Episode 8, the bit with, David hunting Ellie down and like the fires blazing and everything. Like that's literally a boss fight in the game. Is you hiding from David and sneaking up and stabbing him. And, I'm like, I know where this is going to end. I know this ends with Eddie absolutely going ham on his face with a knife. And yeah, I was still so tense watching that sequence. And there's just so much of that. It's almost like the anticipation of a thing is going to happening that still keeps you tense. And like, when's it going to happen? It's that moments in like a horror movie. A jump scare's coming. And the worst part is knowing a jump scare's coming. Because it's so clearly like, oh, we know where this is heading. But there's also a great experience for that for people who don't know, because they can experience the shock of that happening for the first time, like when we first played the game. So everything with that, like the prologue bit, was really well done. I loved getting to know Sarah, however briefly, and establishing, Joel losing his daughter, and then the rest of the show is about him finding another daughter, in a very lovely way, and him slowly kind of, losing his daughter like that, and leaving him with basically no one apart from his brother, and even then they kind of get separated, and he kind of has to build himself back up and let the light in again. It was a really great journey, and I think it paid off so well, I think, with how Joel and Ellie's relationship did develop across the show, because they set it up so nicely, his relationship with Sarah in that opening 30-40 minutes. I generally think like the first episode is one of my favourite first episodes of anything I've ever seen. I think it's a really strong pilot. And yeah, just amazing. I love that first episode so much. And then, after we get into that, we meet Ellie for the first time. We meet Marlene. We have all the setup of like why Joel and Tess have to get Ellie, to the meeting point. So they can hopefully make a cure. Joel and Ellie don't seem to be each other's biggest fans. Tess is like, well, we need to do this to, get what we need to get so we can go where we need to go. And yeah, kind of meeting all these characters and everything with that. They kind of changed up what happened with Robert. They kind of got Robert out of the way very, very quickly. And I do think if I had one real gripe with how the show told the story this time around, I would say the first couple of episodes, it felt like they were getting into the pattern of they're getting there and they've missed all the action. Everyone's already been killed or we've already just missed the gunfight. And it's like, can't we show at least some of this? Obviously in the game we would be living it and actually doing all those gunshots and all those shooting outs, and that would get very samey in a show, granted, but we didn't really see any of those kind of things, I think, really, until like episode 5 with that big like walkers. I've watched too much Walking Dead. The big like infected horde coming out from underground and all of that. I was able to get a bit like the clickers and stuff in episode 2, but it did seem like, okay, they're getting there. Something's already happened. They got there, Robert's already dead. They get to the meeting point, everyone's already been killed. And I was like, I hope we don't continue this pattern and they actually do show us something properly. And they certainly did get over that very quickly, and that qualm was, very, very quickly settled. So I liked everything with that. And Tess, oh boy, I liked Tess in the game anyway. Again, if you played the game, you knew what was coming. You knew not to get too attached to her. But I thought Anna Torv, is that how you pronounce her name? Anna Torv. I don't know if I've seen her in anything before this, but perfect casting again. I think she was great. I love the kind of added elements of like, there were undertones of like, okay, Jess, that's their ship name. Joel and Tess were a thing, romantically in the game. You can kind of like, okay, that feels like I'm getting that vibe. I like that they really go out of their way to kind of very much imply that in here. Them kind of, spooning in bed for a bit. Their little goodbye conversation. There clearly seemed to have been a romantic connection between them. Even if Joel maybe didn't want to admit it and get all lovey-dovey about it, because, he doesn't want to get attached to people, because if he loves someone and loses them, it destroyed him that first time with Sarah. He's not going to want to do that again. So I like that they're kind of showing where he's at in regards to how close he lets himself get to people with Tess in those first couple of episodes, and even losing her and stuff. He's like, right, don't mention her again. That's that. He's like, don't mention Sarah, don't mention Tess. He's very clear about that to Ellie. And then you see like episode 9 in the finale. Ellie brings up Tess, she brings up Sarah, and Joel's completely fine with it by that point. He's very comfortable with it. He's healing over those losses, and Ellie is is the reason why. Got that scene in the finale. And he's like kind of saying that she's the reason that he's better. Feels. So yeah, I loved what they did with Tess in this as well. She was an absolute badass. The added elements to her, just giving her kind of a bit, even more of a presence than the game had, with the limited time that we had with her. Her death, bloody awful. I still gag just thinking about the spores like going in her mouth. Like, that was again a thing they kind of changed up, was how she died in the game versus the show. I mean, it was the same, but we didn't see that because they kind of changed up how the infection works in the show. It isn't like the cordyceps flower things coming out. Like, it's just, you get bitten and kind of that's that. That's the whole like spores situation. Like in the game there are spores, whereas now it's like a real cordyceps thing in the show. Probably visually it's just better to show it like that. Because in the game you see spores around and the characters put on like gas masks and stuff, and then we won't be able to see the actors' faces. So they changed that up. That's kind of a huge deviation. But I think, when you're making a TV show, you want to see the actors be able to act. So I think that made sense. And just like visually, it's horrible. And yeah, her whole death and like the kiss of death from that guy, horrible. But also, really impactful. And I'm so glad she got that lighter working in the end, because my God, that would have been an awful way to go. So yes, very much enjoyed Tess's character. She was fantastic. I guess I've kind of started talking about episode 2 with that as well, haven't I? Which is called Infected. So yeah, that was, that trio really making their journey through. We're introduced to clickers for the first time. I think the iconic zombie infected from the Last of Us series to see them in live action. I think they got the same people who made the sounds like the clicking noises in the games. They brought them back in to do them again in the show, which is great because that sound is perfection. As soon as you hear it, oh shit. Whenever I was terrified of the clickers in the game. They're so awful, and there's a lot more of them in the game than there were in the show. More often than not, you'll be running into like a group of 3 or 4 clickers like every hour or so in the game, and you have to like stealthily take them all out, or they will probably eat you. I died many times to clickers, and they are terrifying. And I loved how they were realised in the show. You can actually see in the very last shot of episode 1, as it pans out in the building, you can actually see one stood on top of the building screaming, which I thought was a nice way of kind of hinting that they're there. And then we see them properly make their debut in episode 2. They're disgusting. Brilliantly kind of realised. The physicality of them was so good. I love the concept of them. You know, it's grown so much over them that they can't see, but they can hear you. So you have to kind of sneak around them. That whole sequence in like the museum-y place was really tense, and I loved it. Like the makeup effects on like all the infected looked so good, and the clickers were no exception. I'm glad they kind of got this iconic kind of foe that you have to kill in these games so right. I know a lot of people, I think one of some people's complaints that I've seen a lot is that there weren't enough infected in the show. Personally, I'm like, I just think back to playing the games, and you would go like hours without seeing any infected, because I think a lot of the enemies in The Last of Us are humans. You know, I remember clearing out a lot of camps of, you know, bad humans or cannibals and stuff like that. You know, you would go hours at a time without any zombies showing up. You know, the show isn't about the infected. That's just the world that it's set in. You know, it's not necessarily like a zombie show. It's a show with zombies in it rather than, you know, it's their main draw. The main draw, I think, is the relationship between Joel and Ellie, rather than, you know, I want to see all the cool zombies. And I think we do get that, and the itch was certainly scratched for me with that scene in episode 2 with the clickers, with the whole ass horde of them and the bloater in episode 5. So, yeah, maybe you could have seen more of them, but also realistically with how they work in the show, which is again kind of a new design, that they're kind of a hive mind, and like if you know, maybe attract one in a certain place or make too much noise, like you summon loads of others, which is a terrifying thought. We'd be fucked if that happened in real life. And again, that's kind of a new addition to the game, because if that was how they worked in the game, you would not be able to complete it because you would just die because you summoned so many of them over to you. So I guess it's just not realistic to have that many around, because they'd be screwed in every situation, I guess. And it would just be the same thing, like them dealing with a horde again of infected, and like we saw that, and I'm sure we'll see different versions of that again in future. But you know, I don't think that's what I personally come to The Last of Us for. You know, to see the infected. Obviously, it is cool to see them, and they are an essential part of them. But I don't think they're the main part, if you get my drift. But I also kind of get if people wanted a bit more from that. But personally for me, I'm here for the characters and the story. That's absolutely the top priority when I watch anything. If I'm going to enjoy something, I need to enjoy the characters and the story above, you know, how many zombies are in it, you know. But yeah, I loved episode 2 as well. I thought it was another really strong one. Did I prefer it to episode 1? I don't even know. I think I might have done even. But that's probably because it was shorter, so the pacing was really tight and everything. That whole sequence with the clickers was great. The cold open to episode 2, oh boy. The actress was called Christine Hakim, who played Ratna, who was the woman, you know, the focus of the cold open of episode 2. They kind of brought her in. They showed her, you know, the dead body, and it, you know, she like cut it open, and there's like the fungus growing in it and everything like that. And she's like, you need to bomb the country, and I just need to go and be with my family now. We're fucked. Again, another really like setting the tone of like shit, and I like how they set that up, and like you need to just bomb this to hell to get rid of this thing. And it's morbid when you then cut back to the present day. They bombed all the major cities and it still didn't work. That's just how strong this thing is. And like, oh boy, horrible. But some great world building with that. And I thought the actress who played, you know, who's like the centre of that, Christine Hakim, She was phenomenal in that first little bit. I just love that every character just has a purpose, even if they're in it for a couple of minutes. They have something to say, and they have, real motivations to be in the show. I don't think there's anyone that's like, oh, really could have done without you. I think everyone has at least something that they can bring, and that's like a 5-minute sequence at the start of episode 2, morbid as hell. I loved it. So yeah, again, episode 2 was fantastic as well. That one was directed by Neil Druckmann, who's the director and writer of the games. He also wrote, he wrote episode 1, and he wrote episode 7, co-wrote episode 9 as well. So, he very much had a lot of oversight into what was going on there. So yeah, I think the first 2 episodes really nicely kind of set up the characters and the world. Already killed off a character in Sarah, already killed off a character in Tess. So we had these major losses in the past and the present in terms of Joel. So now it's just him and Ellie dealing with this loss that they had. So I love the little bits of Ellie and Tess bonding as well. It would have been so, so tragic that we don't get to see that continue. Especially because if you haven't listened to the Last of Us podcast, the official podcast, do it. It adds so much detail of how they went into creating these episodes, the thought process behind it, things that they couldn't end up putting in the show that they had to cut out, things that they had to cut from the game that they ended up putting in the show, like Ellie's mother, for instance. And they had a whole storyline for Tess, a whole backstory that they were going to show that there just wasn't time to do. And that she lost her husband and son. They both got infected in the early days as well. And she, I think she killed her husband, but she couldn't bring it to kill her son, or was it daughter, her child. So when she sees the clickers and stuff, she's very I think it was a daughter actually, because I think that's why she was so protective of Ellie in that moment with the clickers, and she was kind of thinking my kid's probably a clicker now, just running around out there as a clicker. So that whole kind of tragedy to her, I think that really adds to the viewing experience when you kind of listen to that podcast. It's hosted by Troy Baker, who played Joel in the games, and also plays, I think his name's James in episode 8. David's right-hand man. That's Troy Baker, who played Joel in The Last of Us Part 2, which is cool. And they did bring a lot of actors from the games into this. Who else do they have? The actress who plays Marlene. Can I get the actress's name? Is she on this list of people? I hope so. Doesn't look like it. It's not very helpful for me. Oh, no, there she is. Merle Dandridge played Marlene. She was in the first episode and the finale. She reprised her role from the games. She also played Marlene in the games. They brought her in for this as well. So I like that they got her to reprise her role. I think Jeffrey Pierce is his name, who played Tommy in the games. He was the right-hand man of, what was her name? The main villain of episode 4 and 5, that woman. Kathleen. Kathleen's right-hand man. The guy who got killed by the bloater. His head got ripped off by the bloater. He played Tommy in the games. Laura Bailey, who she played one of the nurses in that final episode. She reprised her role there. She also plays a pretty major character in The Last of Us Part 2, so we'll see if they find a place for her in Season 2 as well. So that was all very well and good. And I think potentially my favourite one, I feel like I've missed someone obvious, but also I think my favourite one, Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie in the games, plays Ellie's mum in the finale, which I think is such a lovely touch. The fact that she very much got to give birth to Ellie all over again as playing her mother in the show and bringing the character to life in the games in the first place. So I love that they found a role for her, and I think that was just so fitting and so brilliant. And yeah, Troy Baker, obviously they got to play James the right-hand cannibal man. He was the guy who Ellie killed and sliced him with the thing and just let out like that. That was Troy Baker. So yes, all very well and good. happy times. So yeah, first 2 episodes I think established the characters, the sense of loss, no one is safe, setting up the key dynamic of the show, which is Joel and Ellie's relationship. getting us used to this world and the infected and what it means, what the main goal is here, to get Ellie to the place where they can hopefully make a vaccine or a cure of some kind. Off we go, away we go. Now let's explore, what this world does. So I like that they had a very personal story going on this first 2 episodes, got the world established. Now let's build it just a little bit by seeing how this world has affected other characters that are connected to Joel and Ellie in a way, but maybe not entirely. Which brings us on to episode 3, the iconic episode, I think, of the show. This is the most remembered episode, I would say, long time. And this is obviously the Bill and Frank episode. Bill being a key character from the first game. He kind of very isolated and he lives in this town by himself. He set up all these traps and stuff like that. Joel and Ellie in the game come and find him, I think they try and get a car battery so they can carry on their journey. And I think he only ever calls Frank his partner in the game. But they then kind of they later find that he's killed himself, he's hung himself. I don't think he got ill or anything like he did in the show. It's kind of implied that they were together by calling them partners, but nothing's explicitly said. So that's obviously kind of a thing they really lead into in the show. And you find the suicide note, Frank's suicide note, and he's like, tell Bill I hated him in the end, I can't stand the guy. And you can choose whether you give that to Bill or not before you leave. And Bill's alive and well when you leave him in the game, which is not how things go in long time. Critically acclaimed episode, obviously. I'd be very surprised if we don't get at least Emmy nominations for this one from let's have a look. Murray Bartlett, who played Frank, and Nick Offerman, who played Bill. Nick Offerman I have seen in quite a few things, mainly Parks and Recreation. He played Ron Swanson in that. This character's kind of worlds away from that. And that just shows how amazing he is. I don't think I've seen Murray Bartlett in anything other than this, but he was great as well. Those two together, fantastic. And I love that the first thing they did after setting up the world and the characters with The Last of Us is tell a love story. Love will abide. That's that line in the song Long Time, which the episode's named after, and I think has done very, very well on Spotify and stuff afterwards. I bet the revenue for the woman who sang that's like, yes, please, thank you very much. And it is a great song, and I'd never heard it until this. And the use of it, when Bill sings it to Frank at the start, then when they play it again as Ellie and Joel play it in the car as they're driving away, all of that's fantastic. But yeah, I love that, love is the thing that will abide. Love is the thing that will get people through this world, as we later then see, with Joel and Ellie kind of learning to love each other as like a father and daughter. So I like that's kind of what gets them through. And that is people's purpose. There's that great line by Bill near the end of the episode. He's, I'm old, I'm satisfied, but you are my purpose. So without him, Bill feels like he's ready to go as well. And Ellie becomes Joel's purpose throughout, very much so, just on paper, that's his purpose at the start of the show, but she very much becomes that in his heart by the conclusion of this first series as well. It's like a kind of surrogate daughter figure for him and kind of his saviour and his light. So I really like how they foreshadow that in a way and, explore how love kind of can endure in a world like this and can save you in a world like this. Bill would have died a lonely old man if Frank hadn't stumbled into one of his traps. And yeah, I really like how they massively changed up that story. Again, it would have been fun to have seen the whole sequence with Bill in the school from the game, but I can just play the game. I can watch the gameplay of that. I think they took those characters and gave them so much more meaning to the story than the game ever could have. It was like bare bones, really. Certainly for Frank, because we don't even meet Frank in the game. But the kind of love story that they told with them in episode 3 was phenomenal. The acting was on point. I love how they did kind of, we saw Tess again briefly after her death in the previous episode with that flashback and seeing how they were connected to Joel and everything. It was great, and Joel and Ellie arriving at the end, it's how they can get a car for now, how they can get some weapons. Ellie kind of got her gun in that episode as well. he wore one of Frank's shirts, and that's how he gets his like iconic shirt from the game. And Ellie got one of her shirts from the game from that as well, from like Bill's endless supply of shit that he's just stolen from the neighborhood. Well, it's not really stealing anymore, is it? So yeah, I loved seeing that kind of love story play out for them over the years, from them first meeting, that moment where Bill sings and Frank decides to stay for a bit, and they fall in love over those years and have a really happy life together. Not necessarily happily ever after in a way, but it also is. And I do like that what took those two out wasn't, infected or anything. No, neither of them got bitten. Bill did get shot by those raiders, but it didn't kill him. He did survive that attack in the end, and what killed them was something natural, like an illness. And then, Bill's like, well, this Frank's going, I'm going too, I've had my time. I won't have a purpose without him. And that reveal is heartbreaking. And again, this is the first time I think properly they're like, oh wow, that's very different from the game. And you're really surprised if you have played them. You're like, wow, that's incredibly different. You don't expect, them both to be dead when Joel and Ellie rock up, and certainly not Bill. And then kind of, the reveal that Bill is also kind of, overdosed on those pills, so they can die together, and they leave the window open so it doesn't smell, and then that final shot of the window being open, the wind blowing through, very much like the title screen when you first load up The Last of Us, and the loading screen is an open window with the wind blowing through it, and it's very much that image. So I really like how they tied that in as well. And yeah, it's a beautiful episode. I forgot to say, actually, in terms of my viewing experience, I watched the first episode by myself, because I can't actually get the show, very easily where I am here. So I then watched the rest of the series at my friend Connor and Amy's house. So I watched it with them, and I had two other people to kind of bounce off when we watched the rest of the show, whereas, it was just me watching episode 1 by myself. We were wrecked by the end of this episode. Like, I think every single episode of the show, when we watched it together, it always ended with a collective deep sigh from the three of us. Like, oh my gosh, this is so depressing but so good. And this one was like, oh boy. And yeah, I'm still kind of blown away by it. And we were thinking about this episode for like weeks afterwards. I'm still thinking about it now, I think this is the episode that will go down in history, I think, and this is the episode that will get all the awards and stuff. And yeah, it was just so brilliantly done. The acting was top notch. Just seeing this love story kind of play out. And I think the only kind of infected we saw was that brief sequence with Joel and Ellie at the start, I think. When they're like still searching for supplies. I think that was this episode. Maybe that's the start of episode 4. I can't remember. But yeah, I really liked what they did to really change up the character of Bill and actually introduce the character of Frank, so we could properly meet him and see what that relationship was like in this version of the story, and the kind of tragedy of what an illness can still do even in that world where you're more likely probably to be killed by an infection, rather than just an illness that you can't prevent or certainly can't treat as well with a lack of facilities in that world. And yeah, how the kind of love was what kept them going, and that kind of helped foreshadow Joel and Ellie's journey as they kind of learned to love each other as well. So good. A real standout episode of the show. The first moment that really was like, okay, sit up and listen to this show now, because we are doing different things to the game. It's not exactly what you're going to be expecting. And you're going to get the classic string of videos being like, oh, it's gay, they're forcing it down our throats. Like, shut the fuck up. And I did, very much, if you've played the games, you obviously know that Ellie's a lesbian, so I was very excited when people got pissed off at this episode for being gay. And like, just you wait, mate. Just you fucking wait. Like, one of the main characters is gay. you're going to get very angry, and I'll be very happy seeing you get angry. Um, so yeah, those idiots aside, I do like that. They really went there with an episode like this and really committed to the bit, told a beautiful love story, and yeah, definitely a standout moment for the series, as we kind of got a third of the way through it. So I love that they explored, some, quite popular characters from the game. I think Bill's quite a popular character from the game anyway, in the couple of hours that you'd spend with him in his section in the game. But they just added so much heart and depth to him, and Nick Offerman's performance was just sublime as well. So I loved what they did with that story, and I'm so glad it was as well received as it was, and as watched as it was. Like, kind of really shattered the records, I think, compared to the first two episodes when that first aired. I think it's been beaten kind of week on week since, but I like that the word has started to spread by that point, so lots of people got to tune in for that kind of brilliant world building and expanding, like, the story just beyond Joel and Ellie, who are obviously like the core of the story of The Last of Us. But I like that they kind of really spread their wings and expanded on characters that we did know, but in new and interesting ways. I thought, episode 3 is definitely a standout, and just so brilliantly well done. Masterpiece of an episode, I would say. Then we have episode 4, which is called Please Hold to My Hand. Some people have said Please Hold My Hand. Some places also say it's called Please Hold to My Hand. I don't know how that makes sense. Please hold to my hand. Am I missing something? I would say it's Please Hold My Hand. But even then, I don't know. So yeah, that was a title. I don't know which is the correct one. It's one of those two. I guess we'll find out when the DVD comes out. But yes, this was, I think for me personally, I think this was the weakest episode of the series. And it was still good in itself. It was very much a kind of moving the pieces of the chessboard kind of episode. Very much, just kind of episode of vibes, really. I think this is your standard, if you were playing a game of if you were playing the Last of Us game, like a 25-30 hour story or whatever, this feels like you're going to spend about 15 hours doing this kind of thing, just sneaking around, taking people out, stuff like that. And they still continued to world build, obviously, with the introduction of they speak about Henry and Sam a lot, and then they show up at the very end, got guns pointed at Joel and Ellie at the end, and then they're kind of the key to the next episode. But we meet Kathleen, who's hunting Henry down for being responsible for the death of her brother, and they're exploring Fedra kind of taking over this particular city and trying to gain independence back, and revolution and politics and stuff like that, which is obviously going to come into play in a world like this where suddenly the laws are all gone, but maybe we need those laws. I like that the villains, if you will, of this and the next episode, there's still a method to their madness, and there needs to be some order, surely. Otherwise it is going to all just collapse and crumble. But the way they go about it, probably not ideal, because Kathleen, she's doing what she's doing out of revenge, really, than maybe thinking with a clear head. And I think Kathleen she isn't in the game. I think she is an invention for the show, as far as I remember. But Henry and Sam are in the game. But her kind of whole storyline and those people, I think, is very unique to the show. There is a sequence very much like it, obviously, when Joel and Ellie are sneaking around and shooting people in a shop and stuff like that. But yeah, I very much enjoyed seeing properly, I think, the first major turning point for Joel and Ellie's relationship. Ellie kills a guy to save him. She mentions it's not the first time she's had to kill someone, but she saves his life. And I think Ellie's book of puns kind of comes into play as well here, because I think this is the episode where her and Joel, it's either this one or the next episode, I think, they have a moment where they laugh at the bad puns. I think it's the end of this episode, and then they wake up and Henry and Sam are holding them at gunpoint. But it might be the next one. Who can say? Not me. I've forgotten. But yeah, that stuff is all very well and good, and the big turning points for them, starting to kind of form a bond and understanding, that just goes beyond like, I have a mission, I need to get you to this place to do this thing so I can get what I want and find my brother. So I liked that kind of stuff. But other than that, it was like, okay, you've seen this in like end of the world apocalypse stories before, like people revolting against the system and doing their own thing, trying to get independence. This group of people just killing people willy nilly. Shootouts with people, like all these various like kind of gang wars almost in a way. So it's not really anything unique to the story The Last of Us is telling. So I think it just feels a bit more generic to me, especially coming off of how they took the story in such an interesting and bold direction with the previous episode. This felt very like, okay, we have seen this in a lot of things before. This doesn't feel like, a very unique episode in regards to like, this is The Last of Us. But it was still very, very good. And if an episode, what I think is to be the weakest, is still very, very good, that speaks quite highly of the quality of the show. So yeah, there was still a lot of good stuff in there, and I did like that. Halfway point of the show, they kind of do have a two-parter in a way, with this episode kind of linking with the next one, with the Henry and Sam storyline. But yeah, it was just moving the pieces around, like very much setting the stage for another emotional punch to the gut. I guess after the last episode and the episode before that, the punches kept coming basically in these first 3 episodes emotionally. So I guess they did kind of need an episode like this, just like a palate cleanser. Like, we're not going to emotionally devastate you this week. We'll give you 1 week off. So I guess it is needed in that sense, and it is just like a breather. Like, okay, we've been through a lot. Let's just, build some more blocks for Joel and Ellie's relationship. Just show a bit more of like what could be going on in a world like this, even if it's not anything particularly unique. But yeah, still all good stuff. And we did get a bit of exploration of like, Joel doesn't really have hearing in one of his ears because of apparently a guy shot at him and missed. But then we kind of get more exploration of that in the finale. And then I do like that during the night when they sleep in that apartment, and like, really clever idea of like putting the glass all around them so they can hear if people creep up on them. But then bloody Joel goes and then sleeps on his good ear, so his bad one's the one that's facing upwards, so he can't hear the fuckers come in anyway. But I did like all of that, and they're starting to bond a bit, and then we get the ending with Henry and Sam just holding them at gunpoint, which leads us nicely into episode 5, and very much kind of I'm just kind of just going through. Craig Mazin is the other writer of the show, and he wrote most of the episodes. He co-wrote episode 1, then he wrote 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and then co-wrote 9. So he actually did, a lot of the holding really with the writing of the show. He also directed the first episode. So that's quite cool to kind of have that consistency. But then we had Jeremy Webb even, who directed both of these episodes, again kind of linking them as like a two-parter. But that led us into episode 5, Endure and Survive. For me, I would say this is my favourite episode of the show. I really loved the Henry and Sam portion in the game. I think, again, it's really heartbreaking and shocking. And somehow they make it even worse in the show. I think they're so likeable, and you can really see them. Like, I could really imagine these guys as a 4, like, being unstoppable, and I'd love to see it. And the kind of added backstory that they gave with them as well. In the games, Sam, who's the younger brother, like Super Sam, he's not deaf in the games. That's something they added for the show, I believe, from what I remember. Yes, because the voice actor for Sam in the game is also Miles Morales in the Spider-Man PlayStation games, which is very cool. So yeah, they added in for the show that Sam is deaf, and the whole backstory, like he had leukemia, and Henry was forced to save his brother by turning in Kathleen's brother to get medicine to cure him, and the tragedy is Sam still ends up dying anyway, just in a very different way. But yeah, I loved kind of spending some time at them with the start, getting to know Henry and Sam, seeing their side of the story, So obviously, Kathleen's like, well, he killed my brother, which he did. And Henry's like, yeah, I did a bad thing, but I needed to save my brother. And, she's trying to avenge her brother. So you also kind of get Kathleen's side of things, even if she does go about things in quite a twisted way. And I thought the actress who played her did a great job of kind of quite understated in her performance. But you also like, this woman's nuts, which is Melanie Lynskey, who played Kathleen. So she was great. Then we had Lamar Johnson, who played Henry. I thought he was amazing. And Kevon Woodard played Sam. So Henry's the older brother, Sam's the younger brother. And just what they did with like the backstory, with like seeing those two, talking, like communicating through Sam's little notepad thing that you can like pull off like an etch a sketch and it like resets. And Henry just trying to keep Sam's spirits up, and the idea of like Super Sam. So Sam's drawing all these comics and everything, and then Henry painting like the superhero mask on him, which is so wholesome. And then there's a great shot, probably my favourite shot in the show, is when Henry's looking out a window and there's like an orange sign across the street, so it's reflected in the window, and it actually looks like Henry also has an orange superhero mask on like Sam, which is so cool. Great bit of directing. So yeah, I really liked kind of getting to know those two a bit more, and then cutting back to the present day when they're there with Joel and Ellie. It's kind of an uneasy alliance at first, but then you kind of really see them all bond. You're like, this could really work as a team. And then, there's us who've played the games and know what's coming. You're like, oh God. So, that kind of thing is very similar with them. Obviously, they just kind of added in the Kathleen element of the story. But them kind of getting out of the city through the tunnels, everything with that, seeing like the school underground and everything. That's all, a section in the game. But it's not kind of abandoned, really. You do have to kill a lot of infected, and I died a lot in that portion of the game. And then they do come out in like this seemingly abandoned street where they have the sniper old man coming for them. And then kind of new for the show is when Kathleen and her guys turn up, and then they have the horde of infected underground kind of burst out, and we get the first appearance of the bloater, who's like, I'd say the other kind of iconic infected, along with the clicker, is the bloater. So yeah, all of that's kind of unique for the show as well. And I really love that sequence, just to build up to that, and then you just see this army of them, all these infected pouring out. And the moment with Joel kind of sneaking up behind the sniper, I remember that killing me a lot when I played the game. It's just this old guy. I think this old guy's just done with the world, and he's just ready to go. And he's like, I want you to kill me, so I'm just going to try and kill you. That moment, Joel really doesn't want to kill him. And there's a lot of times where Joel really wants to kill people, and he does. But I like that there are moments where that isn't the case. Very much like when, we've seen moments already of this side of Joel, like when episode 2, when he's just punching the daylights out of this soldier guy to protect Ellie. And then in episode 4 as well, when he's kind of fighting off the bandits that ambushed them and killing a couple of them. Not kind of showing any mercy to that one guy, that younger guy who's like begging for his life. He still just stabs him anyway. I guess you need to survive. And yeah, I like that they do bounce out. Sometimes Joel does have a level head, and he doesn't just kill everyone and anyone. He didn't want to do that, but his hand was kind of forced there. But yeah, that whole sequence with the bloater and that army of infected coming out, just wiping out Kathleen and all her men, and obviously her right hand man, the guy who played Tommy in the game, getting his head just ripped off. So good. That whole sequence was amazing and really badass. Huge vibes of like the army of like whites and White Walkers in Game of Thrones. Hard Home, I think, is the episode where we have the Night King doing that. Huge vibes of like fighting an army off like that. It was done so well. And then the irony of Kathleen's speech that she gives a bit earlier on in the episode. Like, kids die. That's what happens. Kids are going to die in this world. And then she's killed by a young girl who's turned into a clicker. So the irony of like a dead kid being the thing that finishes her off. And that clicker is horrible. The little girl clicker. Again, that's something unique for the show. I like they kind of really went there with like, oh yeah, kids have died as well. We killed Sophia in episode 1, but there were like actual infected kids out there too. And I love that they kind of had that whole sequence. And yeah, Ellie kind of being a bit of a badass in there as well, learning a bit of combat, surviving that situation, and her relationship with Sam throughout the episode, seeing them bond over like comic books and stuff like that, was so wholesome, and I love that so much. And then when all is said and done with that, and they're kind of camping out in the house overnight, and Sam shows Ellie that he's been bitten, and he's like, when we turn to the monsters, are we still ourselves on the inside? He's terrified of, knowing that he's infected, but not being able to stop himself from like attacking anyone, because that seems to be the implication of what happens to people, which is horrible. And he's just terrified of that. And then when Ellie, cuts herself, she's like, my blood could be a cure, and just wipes it on his bite to try and heal him. Oh, it's just so sweet but so sad. And obviously it doesn't work. But yeah, we get the inevitable thing. They kind of agreed to be like, well, the four of us should hang out now. And we're like, yes, we've got a nice team, lovely. And then they wake up the next morning. Ellie turns around. Sam's sat facing away from her, on the opposite side of the bed. Obviously, he's deaf, so he can't hear that she's moving about. Otherwise, he would have already probably gone for her. He doesn't know he's there. I think they kind of imply, Sam knew he was dying, so turned away and faced away from Ellie, so that when he turned, he wouldn't be able to hear that she was there. And he's kind of protecting her in that way. Again, wholesome and awful, and then so heartbreaking. But the inevitable happens. He gets Sam's attention. He goes for her. Henry is kind of forced to kill his little brother, kill Super Sam, and then, just the idea of like having to do that and thinking like he's being punished for something. I think him and Joel kind of talk about, are we being punished for doing bad things? Do we deserve what's happening to us? And then he gets that. Again, it's such a brutal moment in the show as well. And then he just blows his brains out in front of Ellie and Joel as well. Great performance from that guy in that scene. He did that so brilliantly. What was the guy's name again? Lamar Johnson. His performance in that bit where he has to kill Sam and then he kills himself. Awful, awful, awful. And Bella Ramsey is amazing in that scene as well. Her scream when Henry shoots himself. Oh my god, so good. I think Bella Ramsey gets better and better as the show goes on, and I think her performance in episode 8, I think, is the single best performance in the show. They are incredible. Love them in Game of Thrones anyway. And then their kind of turn as Ellie here. Again, as soon as they announced that they were cast as Ellie, I was like, that's perfect. Like, amazing. And I think they really proved themselves again and again and again with their performance here. At first I was like, I can definitely see the potential here. I think there's certainly some Ellieisms, but she really became that character as the show went on, and episode 8 was very much the crux of that. Like, holy shit, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but still. But yeah, I think the first kind of instincts of like, wow, with their performance was that moment. Then obviously the end when they bury Henry and Sam, and Ellie leaves Sam's little note on his grave and just says, I'm sorry. Just emotional devastation. So yeah, that was always, I think, one of the most memorable and heartbreaking sequences of the game for me when I first played it. So I think that definitely kind of leans into why episode 5 was probably my favourite of the show. It was just so brilliant. I loved, the direction as well. I loved that we did get the big action set piece at last, with all the infected coming out from under the ground. But we also got some real emotional moments as well, with Henry and Sam and their story, their bonds with Joel and Ellie kind of forming into something like, oh, they could really be a great group of survivors here. And then just that turn of events going the way it went, and just really awful and tragic again. Then we went on to episode 6, which was called Kin. And this is obviously the big reunion between Joel and Tommy. They finally kind of appear at, I think Jackson is the name of the community, which it's called to actually, it's kind of a major setting in The Last of Us. So to actually see it at this point in the story, it was really cool to kind of get an idea of like how this community is thriving. And some of my favourite episodes of The Walking Dead were when we met a new community for the first time and they were just exploring this new community. I loved episodes like that, and this has obviously those vibes very much so, because we're getting used to a new town, new people, but also there's kind of that link there with Tommy, who we already met in episode 1, but now we're seeing how he's getting on in present day. He's got a wife now with Maria. I thought the actress who played Maria was really good as well. Rutina Wesley. So she was great in the a few moments that we got with her. I wish we'd seen more of Maria actually, but what we got was still fine. And yeah, from there we kind of see Ellie learn Joel's intention is, now they've reached Tommy, he's going to pass on the mission to Tommy, because Tommy used to be in the Fireflies, so he could probably take Ellie where she needs to go. Ellie also learns that Joel had a daughter with Sarah, and the fact that Tommy had a little memorial for Sarah is very sweet and wholesome. So you learn about that, and Maria kind of is very wary of Joel because of his past with Tommy and the fact that they used to have to kill people to survive. There's very much, she doesn't really want that influence, I guess, in her town and on her husband again, because we know Joel has that streak about him. But also, Joel's kind of really going through it mentally as well. We're seeing that he's having panic attacks. Too real, Last of Us. Far too real. And yeah, just mentally, he's not doing great. And I like that scene where he's really confiding in Tommy about how it's going with him. And he's just so desperate for Tommy to take on this mission and, take on Ellie for himself. So that was great. And I liked everything with that. And that Ellie kind of learning that led to another big iconic Joel and Ellie scene from the games, where Joel's trying to explain why he needs to leave Ellie with Tommy, and that needs to be what has to happen now. And Ellie's like, everyone I've ever known or loved has died or left me except you. So I like that we kind of got that scene, which is I think a huge moment of Ellie finally standing up and saying, like, this is what I want. I want to stay with you. You have protected me this far. Why do we have to give that up? We've got a good thing going here, potential foster dad. And I think, we've seen Joel start to really bond with her a lot. But, I think he's still trying to deny that fact. Because it's easier, and because of, I guess, the mental strain that it's having on him, having to take her this far and everything that they've been through. But I think, he ultimately realises, like, I can't leave this particular mission unfinished. I can't leave Ellie behind when we've come this far. So I like that, Joel very much, I think, has Sarah on his mind, being back in Tommy's company. And he's like, why am I giving up having a daughter all over again? They were taken away from me before, and I'm choosing to kind of send one away. And that kind of brings them back together, and Joel changes his mind and says, I should be the one to carry on. Ellie's like, yes, please. I like that she's immediately like, let's go. I don't even need to choose. So yeah, that was all cool. Again, continuing to express their bond and meeting exploring a new area, reuniting Joel and Tommy, just kind of seeing how they're doing. The classic thing of, like, people of, relatives are coming back together, having seen each other in years, and the first thing they do is have a huge argument and nearly fall out entirely. I'm like, come on. But they get over that in the end. By the end of the episode, they're kind of on goodish terms again, and you can understand why Tommy's kind of reluctant to go with Ellie anyway, because he has a baby on the way, he has a whole new life. It's an interesting kind of clash between the two directions that those brothers have gone down. And that is kind of the whole point, is like, what family does mean to us, how far can those bonds be stretched, whether you're family like Joel and Tommy, whether you're not like Joel and Ellie, they're not blood family, but they are still, finding this family in each other. So I did like that connection. And I think there's also a scene, I think it's this episode, there's a scene near the start where there's like an older couple in the shack that they steal a rabbit from them. That scene's hilarious. I love those two. I'm sad we didn't see more of them, but if we had seen more of them, they probably would have been killed horribly, wouldn't they? But that was a really nice little light-hearted moment to start the episode off as well. And seeing like it all set, starting to snow and everything like that, so we're kind of seeing how the story's moving along, and like the seasons and changing. So I like that you're getting a real sense of like just how long Joel and Ellie have been on the road together at this point, and just that kind of development's been really cool to see as time's going on, and seeing this world in different environments, like when it's quite snowy and stuff like that. It just brings whole new challenges. Just when they get used to kind of surviving in a certain way, now it's bloody freezing. We're going to need to find warmth and shelter, even more and probably more often. So yeah, I loved everything with that. Maria kind of warning Ellie off of Joel. She's a bit wary about that. So I like that. It's not necessarily all hunky dory, even for people who haven't even met Joel, already have preconceived ideas of what he's like, from what Tommy's obviously told her. And also, is she entirely wrong? Probably not. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing as well, and that kind of disconnect between Tommy and Joel initially, because he didn't even know that he was married or had a kid on the way and everything, and they'd lost contact for quite some time, and that's why this all happened in the first place. Joel took Ellie on because he wanted to find Tommy again. So I like that we got to a point, like, we're 2/3 of the way through the series. This is like Joel's goal. He's achieved that now, but along the way he's kind of gotten another goal that he now needs to continue onwards with Ellie, and get her where he needs to go. But it's nice that he does kind of still have an ally in his brother, and to the point where he'd even told her that Ellie's immune, and exactly what the stakes are. So it was cool. I think Joel probably would have snapped, if he'd gone another few episodes without being able to confide in anyone in the way that he did with Tommy. He kind of really broke down and cried for a bit, which is a side of Joel we really don't see in the games, particularly in the first game. So I like that Pedro Pascal does bring more vulnerability to Joel in the show. And obviously that's in the writing as well. And having that kind of support pillar where he can really just unfold all these secrets that he's been holding back. It was a good point to do that. So obviously when Joel hopefully mentally has been a bit eased, he gets stabbed at the end of the episode when they're kind of, trying to find this Firefly base and all the monkeys running around. That was nice. I remember that from the game. And yeah, those raiders come along and ruin all the fun, stab Joel. I remember in the game I think he falls onto some like a metal rebar or something. I think he just falls onto it. He like falls off a roof or something, or a balcony onto it. So it's a bit less graphic in the show, believe it or not. They actually decided to tone something down from the game, and I appreciated that. But yeah, he's obviously not in a good way, and it's like Ellie's left alone with this dying Joel. Like, what the fuck do I do now? And that's kind of where they leave things off. So we've kind of had Joel in this real moment of crisis. What the hell does he do at this point? He's kind of reached his breaking point. He's kind of soothed that with Tommy. Now it's time for Ellie's breaking point over the next 2 episodes. Again, a little bit of development with Ellie and Joel here as they kind of reflect on the first person Ellie lost to this world, and the latest person that she cares about that she could potentially lose, and should she walk away from this and save herself this time around or not? What's the best kind of course of action when she's faced with losing someone? Should she try and keep them around and try and help them? Should she just walk away and cut her losses? And obviously that's kind of the basis of episode 7, Left Behind, which is based on the DLC for the first game, which was called Left Behind as well. That's where they obviously got the name from. And it just explores how Ellie got bit and that whole backstory. So I like how it starts off with Joel urging Ellie, like, you just, it's not worth it, leave me, I'm going to die, like, save yourself in any way you can. And she clearly goes to thinks about it, and then that's when she starts thinking about, would I have walked away from Riley? And that kind of spurns this whole flashback sequence, where she's in this like Fedra school, kind of getting bullied, but also she just fights back straight away and gets in a bit of trouble, thinking maybe what she wants to do with her life and stuff like that. Her best friends run off and has joined the Fireflies, then comes back and be like, so let's have a fun day out, bestie. And they obviously go to the shopping mall, which is so cool, and I remember loving that sequence in the game as well, because all was right in the world, and you can literally play all these arcade games for hours on end if you wanted to. You can ride the carousel, You know, that whole sequence in the photo booth and stuff. You do that in the game. I really love kind of exploring that world with those two characters. The scene in the mask shop and the Halloween store when they put on the masks. You know, that's in the game as well, and I remember really loving that sequence. What's kind of, again, in the game, the DLC chapter, This Left Behind, it's telling the story of Ellie and Riley in, you know, the shopping mall doing all of that. You know, they kind of come across an infected who bites them both, and then we get that final scene with them and everything. But alongside that, you play as Ellie in the present day, at that time in the story, where she actually I think she goes to another shopping mall somewhere else. Or was it the same one? I can't remember. She goes to a shopping mall anyway to try and get into a pharmacy to get antibiotics for Joel. And during that point, she kind of encounters other like bandits and soldiers and stuff, and has to kill them all. They cut the present day part of that story out for this and just focused on the past with Ellie and Riley. And, you know, in the present day instead, she just finds a needle in the place that they've kind of ended up at and just fixes him that way, or tries to fix him to, you know, the best of their ability. And I think when it's not a game, I think that's the right way to go. I think it provided a lot more focus. I'm glad that we weren't cutting back and forth like that. I think it really would have killed the flow of the story. So I think that was actually a really well thought out change when you're adapting the story to television. You don't need a very similar kind of thing happening at two different points when it's not a game and you're playing it and you're like, oh, this is fun. We're kind of simultaneously going through similar kind of things, because they can already explore that well enough while leaving the focus on Ellie and Riley. And Riley is played by, I think her name's Storm Reed, who I believe is most known for Euphoria. I think she's Zendaya's little sister in Euphoria. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But she was great in this. I think a really great choice to play Riley. And yeah, I liked the kind of conflict between Ellie and Riley at first. You know, the fact that she's been gone for a few weeks and then revealed that she's joined with the Fireflies. You know, the surprise of like the shopping mall and everything like that, and all that fun they have together before Riley reveals that she's kind of going to be leaving the next day. This is like her last day in Boston, so it's like their last chance for these best friends to spend time together. Obviously, they're more than best friends. This is strongly implied, and well, more than just implied. But yeah, I really like just the natural chemistry between the two of them. I thought worked really well. You got a sense like these two are really close, and have been for quite some time. And you know, a few conflicts a bit when she sees like just how far in with the Fireflies Riley is. The fact that she's making like these explosives and stuff, I think it was. So you know, they keep up the moral grey areas of like every character's actions in the show, which I think makes it really interesting. So yeah, I love just, again, it's one of those moments of dread because you know this isn't going to last. You know, some people remember Riley got mentioned in episode 1. People know at some point Ellie needs to get bit, and we've seen the present day. Riley's not around, so something's going to happen. So you're watching it with this dread, like, when is this going to go wrong? Because they spent a lot of the episode just exploring, doing all these different fun things together. And there's a bit of a conflict there, but then they obviously cut to there's an infected there that they haven't spotted, and it's kind of waking up, and you're like, oh shit, here we go. And I like the kind of slow reveal of that, you know, panning away to reveal that you know, that was there while they're just having fun. And just as, you know, they kiss and, you know, Riley's like, okay, I'll stay because Ellie really wants her to. That's when the infected finally tracks them down. They fight it off. It bites them both. That lovely, awful, tragic scene at the end, where they're, you know, talk about just let's lose our minds together. Little does Ellie know that she's actually immune, and then she's going to have to kill her best friend very soon. But yeah, I do love that scene where Riley's just there. She's kind of accepting it. It's just kind of numb. Like they've just been bitten, stuff like that. And Ellie's just in the background, like smashing everything up and swearing. You know, that pure anger and frustration. I like those two polar opposite reactions to like, I'm fucked. I'm going to die. That's it. And the irony is, the one who really, really lost it is the one who ended up not dying. So I liked all of that, and that kind of that last moment between them, you know, the idea of what could have been, and they just decide to just stay there and wait for the inevitable rather than maybe taking the easy way out or anything. Because can you imagine? That would have been ooh. And then obviously we don't see it, but Ellie does tell us in the finale. Riley ultimately turned and she had to kill her, and that was the first person that she killed prior to the guy in episode 4. So that was all very well and good. I say sarcastically. And, you know, as Ellie finishes reflecting on all of that, she's like, I can't leave Joel as well. I can't lose someone else that I care about. You know, because I think that at this point, very much so, Ellie sees Joel as like someone she really does need in her life and like a family figure for sure. So she finds a needle and starts sewing up Joel's wound. It looks disgusting, and it, you know, Pedro Pascal's very good at pretending he's in pain at that moment. It's just like, oh god, I think I would have killed him in that moment. I won't lie. It would have gone horribly wrong. But I do like that big moment for Ellie. Like, okay, I found someone else that I can live for. I have someone else that I care about, that I don't want to lose. Like I lost Riley, so I liked the kind of, you know, this point of them showing this flashback with Ellie that contextualizes, you know, her first kill, contextualizes, you know, a lot of key aspects of her character, like how she got bit, her sexuality even, and just the parallels between what was happening with that and how she lost someone she cared about then versus her choosing not to let someone she cares about die this time around. She can do something about it this time, and she does. So I loved everything with that. I thought that was really well done, the kind of parallels between those two stories. And Pedro Pascal had an easy few weeks, just had to lie there and just vibe, which is great. He probably recorded some lines for The Mandalorian in between takes. You know, it was easy money. But, you know, this was very much Ellie's episode. And I think what the show also gets across really well, that the game also does, is I think, you know, the show very much, I feel like, is Joel's show at the start. The first few episodes is like the story of Joel and this girl. At this point, I think it's starting to twist a bit, and Ellie becomes the main character, which I think definitely sets the stage as the story continues. And I like how natural that's kind of felt, that the focus has shifted. And obviously, it makes sense at this point when Joel's out of commission, and then we learn a bit more about Ellie. So it's a great point in the story to kind of take this break, and, you know, they're in peril, but here's Ellie's side of things. Here's where she's at now. We've really explored Joel's mental state and everything. Here's how it is with Ellie, and in doing so, we're like, now we can just carry on running with Ellie as kind of like the focus, which I think certainly is the case, at least for the very next episode as well. But yeah, I think they're kind of more so equals in terms of like which character is the main character by the end of the show, if not leaning more so towards Ellie, which is kind of what happens in the game as well. So I really like that. But also the reason they work so well as characters is because of the relationship that they form together. So yeah, Left Behind is another fantastic episode. I love that they did have an episode based on the DLC. You know, I don't think it's something that they absolutely needed to do if they wanted to just stick to the present day story, but I'm so glad they included it, because it just adds so much to Ellie's character and her backstory, and everything was really well done. So I like that episode a lot. And then we had episode 8, When We Are in Need. I think this was the episode I was dreading the most, because this is the creepiest part of the game, and again, as is often the case with like apocalyptic zombie shows or whatever, it's normally the human villains that are creepier and more terrifying and scarier than any infected or zombie could be. Enter David. God, that guy. What a fucking weirdo. What was the actor's name who played David? Do I have it on here? I can't see it, which isn't very helpful. I will find it though, because that actor deserves all the praise for being a creepy fuck. Hopefully not in real life. I imagine he's not in real life. I imagine he's a lovely man. Let's have a look. David. Yes. David is a major antagonist in HBO's The Last of Us. I'd say he is. Scott Shepherd. There we go. Scott Shepherd is his name. So yes. Well done, Scott, for having to portray such a sick and twisted character. Again, going into this episode, we knew, if you played the game, like, it's time for the cannibal people. It's time for the cannibal guy. I don't know if David is like a full-on preacher and stuff in the game. I can't really remember like exactly what his backstory is, but he obviously is like the leader of this group, and they kill people. And when you know that knowledge, that opening scene where he's like, "Oh no, it's too cold to bury your dad. We can't bury your dad yet. We'll have to wait for the snow to melt a bit." Because if you know, and if you rewatch it, knowing the reveal, you're like, "Oh God, they're just saving him to eat him. It's just so horrendous," and all of that is just gross and horrible and everything. But David, by far the creepiest, scariest character in The Last of Us, and I think it's implied, I think, that he's kind of a sexual predator in the game, but they go all out on it in this one. Like, holy shit. It can't be easy to play that character. So, Scott Shepherd, all the praises to you for being just incredibly creepy and horrible, and what a satisfying death, basically. So, I did like... like is quite the word to say about it, really, isn't it? But, this was the portion of the game being adapted to the screen that I was dreading, because it was so horrendous when I first played it, and that twist with him and everything, and him locking Ellie up. The bit where he's kind of like stalking Ellie around, and you have to sneak around and stab him in the game a couple of times, whereas obviously in this show, one stab's probably going to do it for David, and I think Ellie gets him once, then obviously finishes him off with like, she went for the head, she Thanos'd it. And yeah, this was, I think, Bella Ramsey's kind of golden hour. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Like their finest hour for sure. I think their performance in this episode was the single best performance in The Last of Us Series 1. Again, very much the focus, because Joel's still kind of out of commission for most of the episode, and he's still kind of recovering. She goes out hunting, which is when she runs into David and James, his right-hand man, who's obviously played by Troy Baker, who played Joel in the games. She wants to get some medicine for Joel, and kind of an uneasy alliance at first between David and Ellie as they bond, but then I love just the casual way, once David sees like that James is back, he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're the, our group is the people that stabbed your friend, stabbed your father." So that kind of connection with them, I like that it's just not they've just happened to stumble into a group of cannibals. They had encountered them before, because that was the ones who attacked them when Joel got really injured. So I liked that it's kind of connected with that. And just the reveal when she's been, obviously they take her out, put her in a cage, and she sees there's a human ear on the floor, and that's how they've been surviving. All of that is just so vile and disgusting to think about. And that scene where David's trying to get through to her, and she just like dislocates his thumb or something like that. And all of that. I can see why she's as traumatized as she is by the end of this episode. That's for goddamn sure. Trying to put her down on the table so they can start chopping her up, and then that's when she kills James. So good. So yeah, I feel like they were the key elements of this section of the game. They certainly kind of kept true to, and because it's such a powerful part of the game anyway, it didn't really need to change too much. And somehow they did manage to make David even creepier and even worse in the show than he was in the game. But the whole cannibal thing is gross and everything, and Ellie fighting for her goddamn life is, still somehow really tense, even though some of us will know where it's going if we've played the game. And just actually goes to town on him at the end, he tries to rape her, for God's sake. So I think I would too. I would chop him into little pieces until there's nothing left. And yeah, just Bella Ramsey is amazing in that scene. And when she bumps into Joel again at the end, and he calls her baby girl, which is what he called Sophia, so it's kind of come full circle, like, okay, she's your daughter now, buddy, you are father and daughter. And that's why I like that. Joel, once he does start recovering, obviously he gets kind of they discover where he's recovering, and he kind of has to force himself to fight back, and that kind of gets his adrenaline pumping again, I guess, and then he can go and get Ellie. But probably my single favourite moment of the entire first season is in this episode, and is due to Joel. When he's interrogating those two guys, and he like stabs the first one in the knee. He's like, point to where you are on this map. Point to where your camp is on this map. It better be the same as what the other guy says, or you know. And he does it, and then Joel just kills him anyway. And then the other guy's like, I'm not telling you anything. And best moment in the show, Joel's like, don't worry, I believe the other guy, who just kills him. Oh, brutal, horrible, unnecessary, yes. Badass? Punch to the air? Hell yeah. I feel bad for it, but there you go. So yeah, that was a real like moment, because holy shit, there is the Joel that has survived this long, and there's the Joel that, you know, Tommy backed away from, the Joel that Marie is very scared of, the Joel that Ellie sort of kind of likes, that he'll go that out of his way like that to protect her. So yeah, more often than not, that is what Joel descends into, certainly in these last two episodes. So brutal, obviously he's kind of made his mind up at this point. You know, Ellie kind of came back and saved him. You know, I think he very much feels like he owes her, and also, you know, he has so much affection for her at that point. To the point where, you know, he does call her baby girl, just like he called Sophia. Yeah, off they go. Back into the snow for more traumatizing adventures at the end, when all is said and done. As was often the case, Joel and Ellie, like, the only two people left standing at the end of an episode of The Last of Us. But yeah, it's a really uncomfortable watch in a wonderful way. The performances are amazing, particularly the guy who played David was fantastic, and Bella Ramsey killed it in this episode. The best performance, I think, someone gives in the show. Incredible, and I loved it. Certainly up there with episode 5 as it's probably second to episode 5 as my favourite. I'd have to think about it. I need to rewatch the entire series again, really. I've only watched every episode once at this point. But those are my top two, without a shadow of a doubt. That episode is amazing. Brutal, uncomfortable, badass, sad. Everything you want, basically. And just the real kind of culmination of Ellie and Joel's relationship to that point. They have now really kind of found that father and daughter bond. And yeah, just so well done. I love that bit so much, and I love that episode so much. And then we come to episode 9, the finale, Look for the Light, which, as I'm recording this, aired today for us in the UK. It aired last night for people in the US originally. And yeah. Oh boy. Again, I feel like this might be the closest to the game, I think, in terms of what happened. I don't think they really went too far off with what happened in the game. It is basically like a note for note, perfect adaptation from the game into this, with the exception of the addition of Ellie's mother in flashbacks, by Ashley Johnson playing her, Anna. And yeah, just the fact that she's like bitten by that infected as she's giving birth. Potential reason for maybe why Ellie is immune. Don't know. I think they just kind of offer it as like, there's something to speculate about. I don't think there's a confirmation properly either way, but I do like that there's like a possible explanation, because I don't think it's a spoiler really to say the games never explain why Ellie's immune. We never get answers, or we certainly haven't yet. If there's a Last of Us Part 3, who can say? And maybe they'll kind of delve into, you know, immunity and stuff like that there, but I don't think, because it's not the point of the story, I don't think it really needs to be the answer. You know, we never find out why the apocalypse and infection started in The Walking Dead, how that happened, because that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the people who become The Walking Dead and become this found family. Who cares how it happened? It's a very trivial thing in the grand scheme of the story that they want to tell. And I think that's kind of the case here with Ellie's immunity. But I like that they kind of maybe put a little case in there for it. So yeah, I liked that flashback a lot with Anna at the start, and seeing Marlene, the fact that those two are kind of old friends, and she has to kill Anna at her request and take Ellie away. So just kind of seeing that, you know, that bond that's kind of been there. and kind of really contextualizes how difficult the decision probably was for Marlene to make in regards to having Ellie be operated on in an operation that will have to kill her to make a cure, potentially make a cure. Yeah, that was quite the way to start the episode, but I really liked how they kind of handled that and, you know, saw the birth of Ellie in that regard. Then obviously we have the Fireflies capturing Ellie and Joel near the start, having absolutely no idea who they were, so they just like, there you go. And yeah, I think this might have been the shortest episode of the show, because the pacing was just like, damn. And we also got the iconic giraffe scene from the game. I'm so glad they put it in. I didn't know if they were going to, and it was a real giraffe. They did post some behind the scenes stuff. They actually did have a giraffe just on set with them. It was literally right there with them. It was all real. Obviously the setting was all like blue screen and stuff, but the giraffe was actually there that they could pet and stuff. So that was really cool. But I didn't know if they were going to be able to kind of bring that to life properly for the show, but they did it, and it was so cool. And I love that they did include that moment because it's one of my favorite scenes in the game. So I'm glad we got that, you know, before the pain kind of returned to us. So yeah, Joel obviously wakes up. By this point, they've taken Ellie in to prepare her for the surgery. Marlene explains, like, you know, they think potentially we can make the vaccine by using a bit of Ellie's brain. So obviously we're going to have to kill her. And she's very torn because she obviously promised Anna that she'd protect Ellie and keep her safe. And now she's like, well, we have to kill her now. So I did like they kind of really added that dynamic into it, and that added element of the flashback with Anna, which obviously isn't in the game. Marlene does have a relationship with Ellie anyway in the game and everything, and we did see that in episode 1. You know, she's aware of Ellie. They are, you know, friendly with each other and everything. So obviously she'd be very torn up about that decision anyway. But I like that they added that extra element to it and how hard it must be for Marlene to do that. And she's like, sorry, Joel, this is happening. Bye. Thanks for helping us out, by the way. She's like, we owe you one, but also we'll kill you if you try and stop us. So mixed messages. And then the massacre. We knew it was coming. Well, if we played the game, we knew it was coming. Because I remember very well killing everyone in that goddamn hospital. Dying many times trying to do it, mind you. And also, I felt bad because Joel spared 2 of the nurses. And they just like, turn your backs, just, you know, let me take her. He kills that one guy in there and then just leaves the other 2 nurses. And then he leaves. I didn't do that. I killed all 3 of them. I think you could choose who you shot, and I was like, leave Ellie alone. Leave my daughter alone. Not my daughter, you bitch. That's basically what he said. You know, so that's kind of a big impactful moment, and just Joel just going on a rampage, killing everyone in this hospital just brutally. And you know, you even see then when he takes Ellie away, he has to kill Marlene as well. He like shoots her. Then she begs for her life and be like, just please spare me. And he's like, no, you'll come after her. Shoots her. No second thought, just like boom. And obviously huge moral grey areas with that. You know, if we spent the show in the main, if Marlene was the main character in the show, Joel would be the villain at the end, coming in doing all that. We'd be like, what an awful tragic ending. Like, he's killed them all. This guy has just shown up and killed them all for this little girl. You know, he's destroyed our chance of a cure. He's lied to the girl about it. But we've been following Joel and Ellie during this journey, and they've been the main characters for us. So almost like, obviously, we need to save her. You know, we can't just let her die. You know, he's found a daughter all over again. He can't lose that again. But also, like, he's potentially doomed the world to be this way forever because there's no one else that is immune. And then on top of all that, you know, he kills all those people and then lies to Ellie saying there were plenty of girls like her and they've given up searching for a cure. So it's like, oh my God, what would you do in that situation? I really don't know. I probably wouldn't have killed everyone in the hospital. That was a mistake. You know, brutal murder of all those innocent people just trying to save the world. But also, if it was your daughter in that position that they were going to kill, could you just let it happen for the greater good? I really don't know what I would do. So, you know, this is a debate that's literally been going on for 10 years. You know, was Joel in the right? Should he have done that? That's obviously a huge part of the second game. It's obviously just a huge part of fan discussions in general. What does this mean? This huge lie that he told Ellie at the end, and saying, promise. She's like, promise me. She's got a bit of survivor's guilt. Like, promise me what you said was true about the Fireflies, and they've given up and everything. And he's like, absolutely, it's true, which we know is a big faced lie. And I do like that final scene. They end it exactly the same way they end the game, and he's like, okay, cuts to black. That's the end of the game. That's how they ended the show as well. Well, at least the first series of them. And we obviously know it's a big fat lie. We know it's a TV show. It's probably going to come out at some point. So there's some cool setup there for series 2. But yeah, just a brutal moment of Joel just going through all the hospital and stuff like that. And then a brief kind of reprise as Ellie wakes up in the car and he lies to her face. Then they go on a nice little hike back to find Tommy and that community. They talk about Sarah a bit, so showing how far he's come. He's just so willingly open to talk about Sarah with Ellie now. But she's obviously struggling, A, from the events of episode 8, and B, from some survivor's guilt almost of, hearing that everyone in the hospital was killed by raiders. And Marlene is probably not okay. So yeah, it's super morally grey. And again, I'm glad I finished the game and then got to instantly see what happens next playing the second one. Whereas some people had to wait 7 years to find out where part 2 went with the story. So yeah, a really, really great finale. And I think really accurate to how it played out in the game. I can't really think, outside of like the inclusion of Anna at the start, anything that they changed that massively. Joel kills everyone in the hospital in the game. He kills Marlene. He lies to Ellie. All of that. And just the moral greyness of it all is really interesting. So yeah, I think they really ended off on a huge high. I mean, there's so many highs during these 9 episodes, and what an amazing first season. I loved it. Every single episode was great, at the very least. And then some just like super elevated for me. Episode 5 and 8 and 3 as well, I think, are the huge standouts for me. But some key moments of the game they adapted brilliantly for live action. The casting was on point. Some amazing moments, amazing performances from our main cast, but also some of the guest actors and actresses as well. Some of the things that they dramatically changed from the game. I think one of the main ones being how the infected work, and Bill and Frank's story in episode 3, Sam being deaf. I think they actually enhanced the story from the game and made it even better and more impactful than ever before. So yeah, it was all just so good. I'm so glad it turned out amazingly well. I'm glad we've kind of really turned a corner, I think, on video game adaptations. They're not shit anymore. They've been quite good in the past couple of years. I think the Sonic movies are quite fun. This has been phenomenal. I'm obsessed with The Last of Us show now. I can't wait to just rewatch it and like binge it all over again. And yeah, great finale and everything like that. I'm looking forward to kind of going through it all again and properly digesting it. But I loved those games. I adore them. I adore the story and the characters and the world. And, I think you could easily go through this show and be like, God, Joel's a horrible person. Or you can be like, oh, Joel. So I love that it's so open to interpretation with that. You might absolutely love Joel. You could also not be able to stand him for what he did throughout the show, and particularly with his decisions he made in the finale. So yeah, there's just so much great stuff there. And a lot of the new stuff that they added in, I think really, really worked. And just enhanced the story. I loved it. It's great that we have the game still, if you just replay that, and the magic, the lightning in the bottle they capture with those games. And I think they have done it all over again in an enhanced, different way for a TV audience. And there was something in it for people who have never seen this story play out before. Maybe they don't play video games. Maybe the series just passed them by. The Last of Us Part 2 came out, and then COVID hit, basically around the same time. So, you could be forgiven for being a bit distracted during that time, and you may not have heard about all the stuff about The Last of Us Part 2 and everything like that. And obviously the first game is now 10 years old, so it might have just passed you by back then. So I love that there are so many people who can experience the story for the first time in a TV format, and I think the changes they've made to tell it in the TV format, for the most part, worked really, really well. I loved what they did with all the characters, adding new layers to them. Pedro Pascal was phenomenal. Bella Ramsey was phenomenal. So many of the guest cast were just sublime, and yeah, top quality stuff from start to finish. I adored all 9 episodes, and I don't think you can necessarily always say that for a show, particularly a first season of a show trying to find its feet. And obviously bringing in the writers and like directors of the games in for this, like Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. I think they're the original creators of the game in the first place. Bringing them in for the show and them having a huge say in what happened and how it's developed, I think really helped make this something truly special. I loved it. I hope you loved it too. And who's excited for Series 2 whenever we get that? It's going to be something, alright? And yeah, I can't wait to talk about that whenever we get it. Either way, phenomenal show. I just had to talk about it, and I've talked about it for... I don't even want to check the time. Oh, fuck. An hour and 45 minutes. Oh, God. Well, it didn't feel like I talked about it for that long, so I guess that's a positive. I'm sorry, I've done it again. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. If you made it this far, well done. How have you made it this far? You literally probably could have watched, a good 2 or 3 episodes of the show instead of watching this. And I would recommend you do that instead, to be honest. But at this point, to recommend that to you would be too late, because it's an hour and 45 minutes in. But yeah, I absolutely adored The Last of Us Series 1. Can't wait for Season 2 whenever it drops. I think they did a great job adapting an already amazing series of video games to a whole new audience. And obviously offering plenty for people who love those characters and that story anyway. Amazing stuff, and I can't wait for more whenever we get it. But let me know what your thoughts were on the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know things you liked, things you didn't. And yeah, maybe try and keep it spoiler-free for Last of Us Part 2 if you have played it or know what happens, just in case there are people in the comments and watching this who haven't played the game and don't know where the story goes from here. But yeah, I adored it. I'm glad it was more than worth the wait. And yeah, it's been living in my mind rent-free for the past 2.5 months. So I need a new obsession, basically. Although Shadow and Bone Season 2 comes out in a couple of days, so that's my new obsession. Either way, this was amazing. I hope you enjoyed me rambling about it for this time. I hope I said something even remotely insightful at some point. Who can say anymore? I haven't done this in a long time. I'm probably rubbish at it. But there you are. Thank you all for watching. Good to see you. And I will see you in whatever I ramble about next. But until then, thanks for watching.